I'm going to show you the EMU SP1200 sampling drum machine. This one's a first generation from 1987, and shout out to Rossum for loaning it to me. If you just got one of these, this demo will show you some vital features needed to understand the unit. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, and check out the other info in the description area below for the shortcut index and other details. So let's power up the SP1200, flick the power switch on the rear, then insert the operating system disk. While that's loading, we'll start with the overview. Across the bottom, you'll find the 8 black pads, numbered 1 through 8, and this is where you load or record sounds into, and also what you use to tap your beats in with. You can put sounds into various locations and mix or pitch them with the 8 faders above in relative position to each pad. At heart, the SP1200 is a 12-bit 26 kHz analog to digital converter, aka sampler. It has a 10-second sample memory, but it will only later record audio up to 2.5 seconds per time. And this will allow you to put sounds on any of the 8 pads across 4 banks, so you can have a total of 32 sounds of memory at once. But to achieve that many, you'd learn to become very frugal with your samples. If you keep your samples short, you can get away with quite a bit, bearing in mind that the sum of all samples together cannot exceed 10 seconds. So here's a tip. Some users will play their samples into the SP1200 at twice the speed, and then slow it down using the tune levels, effectively doubling the time allowed, but also giving you more of that infamous gritty 12-bit resonant ring that made this thing so notorious. So above the pad banks, you have a very basic mixer, tune levels, and or envelope decay controls. Then across the top section you have the 4 main menus. To access these, click one and then punch the feature number you want into the keypad and press enter. So starting with the sync menu, by default it should be set to internal at option 1, which is the best because the SP kills it running on its own clock. So do yourself a favour, let it rock on its own clock, because MIDI sync will not provide that SP1200 swing or feel you've heard about. Just record the outputs as audio into your DAW or tape machine. Alternatively, you can select a MIDI clock that will require a MIDI cable coming from a drum machine or DAW to provide MIDI sync via clock pulses. You also have SMPTE and an audible click sync option to choose from too. The click will need at least 24 or 48 pulses per quarter note, PPQ, but that depends on what device you're syncing with. So if you're going to go that deep, you should consult the manual for further details. Next we have the disk menu. Floppy disks are in short supply these days, but you'll need some 3.5-inch floppy disks for the SP1200. Make sure they're the double density kind. Check that they're not write protected and put them in and choose format at option 9 on the disk menu. But remember, do not format your operating system disk. In fact, make a backup of that and keep a spare safe. More info on that in the description below. Once you've got some formatted floppies, then you can start saving and loading sounds and sequences, but keep in mind the term catalog in this disk menu is actually EMU's way of saying directory. So that means you can pull up a directory of what's on the disk, and you can use the fader level at number 1 to scroll through the contents. Next is the setup menu. If you're triggering the SP1200 via MIDI, you can set the MIDI channel you need on setup page 22. Page 19 is loop/truncate, and in EMU terminology that is crop or trim/loop, and this is where you edit your sample start and end points or loop points. You'll end up doing that quite a bit with one of these. Page 23, labelled special, is another list of options, but you have to use the first fader to scroll through that list. Strange, but I guess there was no other room for EMU to put these extra options. So think of that as setup menu 2, and there's some great options in there like erase all, which will purge everything in memory. There's a reverse option in there. You can name sounds, you can swap sounds, and you can copy. But copy is not a real copy. You can't edit a sound that's been copied. According to the manual, the copy option is to allow you to layer sounds or use the sound through an alternate rear output. If you want to copy a sound that you can edit, you have to sample it in again or save it, load it back in. But before you do that, just make sure you rename the sound currently in memory so you don't overwrite it before loading it in again. So let's sample. Make sure you have a 1/4-inch audio cable plugged into the rear input labelled sample input. Make sure you are using the mix out for this demo and not one of the individual outputs numbered 1 through 8. Check that the source audio level is good, because this is where the art of sampling really matters. The right level of audio gain on the SP1200 versus your source audio frequencies, all of that will influence the end result. The tone will change greatly, with the most subtle adjustments being interpreted into binary by the SP1200's digital audio converter. And as you push the SP1200's input ceiling, you might destroy your sound, but in a really good way. If you need more input level, go to option 3 called level of the sample section. You can add plus 20 dB or plus 40 dB of line level, and then you can use the gain rotary knob next to the red sample button to add more or less gain as well. So if you're happy with the amount of level that's coming into the SP1200 that you can see on that little LCD display, then you're ready to record a sample. So let's set the SP's threshold so we can arm the unit to record. And we do that by going to page 4, which is called threshold set. And you can see it says use slider number 1. And what we want to do is put some audio through, and we'll set this slider, because that there will automatically start the SP1200 recording when audio exceeds that level there. So I've got a pretty heavy drum and bass beat coming in, so I don't need it right up there. I could just use it there. So now that that's all good, what we can do now is just put it into sampling, which is arming the unit to do an automatic record once that threshold is exceeded or met, and just hit 7, sample armed. Now put your audio in. Now it's recording, 2.5 seconds will run out pretty quickly. Checking sample is good. So now we can take it out of sample and just hit the pad. And there it is. And so just for an experiment, let's go back to sample. A2 is now where the SP1200 is going to record next, which is pad bank A, pad 2. And so what we'll do now is go to level, and let's just chuck in an extra 20 dB of gain there, enter that in. Now let's arm and cue up the audio again. So sampling, now we're overloaded. So let's hear what it does to an overloaded sample. Take it out of sample and trigger pad 2. Not too bad, but pretty scary. Alright, so now that we've got a couple of samples in there, in fact what I'll do is I'll delete the 20 dB sample at number 2. We do that by going setup, delete a sound. Are you sure? Yes. So hit number 9, which has got yes, or if you're not sure, hit number 7, which is no. And so now when we go back to the sample page, A2 is queued up again. But let's take off the 20 dB, knock that back down to 0, 0, and arm it again. So let's cue that audio again. Sample is good. Now that white noise sort of sound that you can hear in the back, don't be too concerned about that. That's actually stopping your speakers from feeding back. Some people see that as a drawback, but I kind of see that as a bit of a safety catch. So we've got 2 samples now. Alright, so let's tidy those up, and what we'll do is we'll go into the setup page, loop truncate page at number 19, and we'll trim those samples up so we've just got a kick and then we've got a snare here. Okay, so we go setup 19 and then truncate, which is EMU's terminology for trim. So let's start with A1. We could go A2 just by clicking on it. And now we're faced with this little readout here, and S represents start, E represents N, L represents loop. And so what you want to remember is that 1 and 2 are start, so you can see start moving, 3 and 4 are end, and then 5 and 6 is loop. And thing to remember about these is that the end should be all the way up, of course, and the start needs to be all the way down. The first level out of these two, or these three groups, is it moves in great numbers, whereas the second one moves in lesser amounts. So it kind of helps you fine tune, but by no means can this thing do fine tuning. So it actually jumps in little clusters of like 30 or 40 samples. But anyway, let's just cut off the snare. Oh, loop's kicked in. Bit of a dodgy fader. Alright, that's pretty good. So if you're happy with that, what you can do is then hit enter, and it'll ask you if you want to make the truncate permanent, meaning that do you want to discard the sample pieces that you've just trimmed off, and I'll say yes. So that's good enough, and let's just for an experiment just go to tune and pull the tune all the way down on both of those two sample pads that we've got there. Alright, that's sounding pretty good. So let's get the second pad into the truncate page, and let's cut off the front of that kick using these. Loops on again. These faders are annoying. And we can take off the rest of it as well. So let's trim off the end of pad 2. Loops on again. Let's just pull that down. Loop. Having a hard time with this loop. Anyway, so that's good enough to go. Let's just take that the way it is. Okay, that's fine. So what we want to do now is I'll show you a trick with channel assign, which is at 17. And it's going to show us which output channel these channels are assigned to. Now I want to make sure they're all on the same output channel, because currently that one's on 7, that one's on 8, so let's make them both 7. And that means they'll interrupt each other because there's only one voice per output. So, and there we go. So that's good. That's good enough for now. So what we'll do next is we're just going to put a couple more little sounds in. So back to sample. I've got one queued up here. Let's just kind of knock that down a little bit. Alright, that's pretty good. Too much. Alright, that's good enough. Let's go. And a couple more. And one more. Okay, so let's check those out. Let's take that. Okay, that's good. So yeah, without too much mucking around, you can get some good little things happening on this. So with those, let's just put down, actually I'll show you the reverse on that particular sound. So under setup, page 23, at the top you've got number 25, which is reverse sound. So that's that special menu, and at the top of that one's 25, so 25. Let's reverse that one. Okay, so didn't turn out as good as I thought it would, but anyway, you get the idea. Next ones, these are fine. I was going to show you quickly the multi-pitch. So if you click on Setup menu, 11, multi-pitch turns the pads into kind of like an MPC, 16 levels. And then you can turn that off by going Exit Multi-Mode. So it's back to setup number 13, turn that off. It says exit multi-mode, you want to go yes. And then you're back to normal again. And then you've got the multi-level, which is again like an MPC's multi-level mode. You could put that into 12, pick the sound. You've got that. And now what we should do is probably just try making a little beat with what we've got. So you can go into, we want to, when you see this little light on multi-mode, we're still in that mode, so let's get rid of that. Exit multi-mode is number 13. Do you want to exit? Yes. So let's figure out the BPM for that. Go to segment, and then here, hit tempo. Now we can try to guess, or we can tap it in here. If there's something on there, you can just click erase. And it's asking you to erase the sound or the segment. In this case, we just want to go 01, which is the segment number. Confirm it, yes. So the segment number 01 is where we're going to be recording this little beat. And if you hold down record and do play, you'll hear a metronome. And you can take the record out. So that sounds alright. For now, let's just put the record back on. And when you see the blink on run stop, that's the start of the actual segment or sequence. Might need to adjust the tempo. Anyway, you get the idea. And so next what you can do is go song, and if you'll actually we'll make a copy. Let's go copy segment 01, enter, to segment 2, enter. So now we've got something different on segment 2. And if we just go record again, and if your voices are cutting out like that, that means they're sharing the same voice as we saw earlier on 17, channel assign. So let's put the bells on 8, put the backwards church bell on a different voice. Now we should be able to hear those things properly. Actually, the tempo on segment 2 is not the same. Just that. What's segment 1? 114, segment 2. 114. Okay, so for the song arrangement, now you put it in a record and you just go, okay, at step 1, segment 1's playing for 1 measure, so we'll just put that in there, put segment 2 in step 2, and then on 3 you just click end here, yes, and then that's your song. If we just go back to segment, and I just want to point out that autocorrect is your quantize. By default it'll be set to 8ths, so you can just set that to 16, so you can go up to 32 if you want. High res I think is 24, but it won't go any further than that because this unit only is 24 pulses per quarter note. Anyway, you've got that, you've got the swing which moves in some rigid kind of lots, but anyway, that sounds pretty good when you get used to it. And then if we just go to the setup, the special menu, again, 23, use the slider. Just want to show you, there's a couple of things in here. The default decay, so 19 in there. The default decay is all set to 31 by default, but that'll that speaks for everything really. All the sounds in one go. You can't just set that individually. And then you've got back to 23, the slider function. There's a dynamic option in here. So dynamic allocation works in conjunction with the channel outputs on the rear of the SP1200. There's 8 numbered outputs on the rear that can take a TS or a TRS type 1/4 inch cable, and what they do is the first 3 give you a tip unfiltered output, the next 3, which is 4, 5 and 6, give you a ring filtered output, and then 7 and 8 give you an unfiltered output. And what that sort of means is that depending if you use a TS or a TRS type cable, and that's tip sleeve or tip ring sleeve, whatever components they connect with will give you that kind of filter out of those particular outputs. But the dynamic allocation, what that will do is fire out audio depending on which channels you set it up with on that particular feature there, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a note polyphony style of, you know, being able to hit the same sound twice, because if you've got one sound firing out on one output, it's going to be monophonic basically. It's only got one voice. So if you need to kind of try to get some sort of polyphony going, dynamic allocation will help you achieve that. And that pretty much wraps up this demonstration on the SP1200. So thanks very much for watching, and I hope you've learned something new today. And like, subscribe and comment below, and stay tuned for more videos coming soon.